Dzień dobry. Dzisiaj w programie Gość Pafere rozmawiam z bardzo ciekawym gościem.
Hi, my name is Mikhail Svetov. I'm a Russian libertarian, leader of the Libertarian Party of Russia, chairman of the civil society movement, and I've met with Jan in Colombia, and we decided to make a show.
Yeah, to make a show. So, as I said, you are a very interesting guest of Pafere because you are a libertarian from Russia. And, these two words, for me, does not play together.
Well, to be honest, if you were paying attention, the libertarian movement in Russia is actually very strong, and we had some big successful rallies in central Moscow, like a rally in defense of Telegram and freedom of speech, a rally in defense of independent candidates into Moscow parliament, and those were the biggest rally in the modern history of Russia. Mm-hmm. So we've been very successful. People don't really talk about us because we're not really talking with the Western establishment. So, but if you were paying attention to Russia and what's going on there, we've been quite prominent in the last couple of years.
So I think that our talk will be one of the first to turn attention of Polish audience to Russia and the libertarian movement. Okay. Let's talk about history. So when it started?
Well, it started over 10 years ago, and I joined almost at the beginning. I'm not the founder of the party, but I was there in the first couple of months. So, but I became prominent 4 years ago after I returned to Moscow, after living in Japan and New Zealand, and after sort of turning things around a little bit and making the libertarian movement more successful, I'd say. So it became.
Yeah, yesterday you said that you have made a big impact, and today you are very modest.
I think I did make an impact. I sort of turned around the way things were done in the Libertarian Party, and that's what brought us success. And I have some personal successes. Like when we're talking about rallies, it was work of many people, not just myself, even though I played an important part. But I done things that nobody in Russia done before or since. For example, I had a lecture tour spanning 70 cities of Russia, from Kaliningrad to the Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, that's close to Japan, reading lectures there. A huge success. Most of the lectures were attended by at least 200 people. And I mean, like, you come to a small city of 1 million people, like a Samara, for example, and you have an audience of 200 people. That's unthinkable. And the lecture was dedicated to libertarianism. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge success. Not many people in the West done something like what I did in Russia. And in Moscow, my biggest lecture attracted more than 1,200 people. Mm-hmm. So and the lecture was dedicated to libertarianism, so that's a big success.
Yeah, and you're running also your own YouTube channel?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. It's called SVTV. It's SVTV. My last name is Svetov, and it's just like a shorter version of my last name. Mm-hmm. And I had some shows in English as well. So if you're interested, I had Hans Hermann Hoppe come to my show and giving lecture in Moscow as well, a huge success, and it's been recorded as well. I had some right-wing personalities like Tommy Robinson coming to my show as well from United Kingdom, chairman of Cato Institute, Peter Gudler, chairman of Fee Institute was on my channel as well. It's all in English with subtitles, so if you're interested.
Yeah. Okay, some numbers. How many are of yours in the Soviet? How many libertarians are in Russia?
Well, again, there's libertarians and there's members of Libertarian Party of Russia. There's not that many members, just a couple of thousands, but it's becoming harder and harder to ask people to join, because basically if you join a political party in Russia today, you're facing criminal prosecution, and a lot of my friends are under house arrest right now. Some of them were in jail. I was in jail just a couple of months ago, got out, I had my house searched.
And they were some assholes?
Oh yeah, but that was a couple of years ago in Kemerovo. I was kidnapped at the airport of Kemerovo. I came there to read a lecture that was planned very well in advance, and right after I left the clean zone of the airport, I was apprehended by thugs. They beat me up, they closed me in the room, and then they boarded me on the empty plane back to Moscow, telling me that I will not be allowed to read a lecture there. Things like that happened. Then I returned to Kemerovo a couple of months later and read a successful lecture, but I didn't fly there. I actually took a car, a private car from a neighboring city, so they would know when and how I came in. So things like that happened. Yeah, I was arrested several times. I was put in jail several times. Had some interesting things happening. Like I've read a lot of lectures, but some of them were quite unusual. And 3 years ago, I was about to read a lecture on how government reforms, steal opportunities from people and how market liberates them. And I was apprehended on my way to the lecture hall, and I've actually read lecture from inside the police van, and I recorded myself on my phone and sent it to my friends, and they projected my lecture from inside the police van onto the lecture hall where I was supposed to read that lecture, and that was quite successful. I had, like I was explaining, that we organized a couple of rallies, very successful rallies in Moscow. The biggest one was over 50,000 people, and the only...
What you fought for?
Well, there were several different topics. Like, we fought for freedom of speech on the internet because Telegram, which is a very popular messaging service in Russia, it's not transparent to the government, so it's very well encrypted. And they were trying to ban it for the longest time. And when they started doing it, we organized a rally in defense of Telegram, and it was our first hugely successful rally. Then we organized a rally in defense of political prisoners who were tortured in a police station, and in support of independent political candidates who were trying to get on the ballot in Moscow election. So, and the biggest one was 50,000 people, and after having organized that, I was planning to make another rally, even bigger rally, but then I was called in to talk to the to go to the mayor and talk to his people, and they wanted to negotiate. They wanted me to betray my supporters, and I refused. So the moment when I left the building, the mayoral building, I was apprehended by the police, and I was arrested for 30 days. And during that time when I was arrested, another rally happened. And it's like a story from James Bond. I actually recorded a speech for that rally from inside the cell.
Okay.
That was supposed to be played on that rally, and it's on my YouTube channel as well. It's called Speech from Inside the Cell. And yeah, had some weird and interesting stories like that.
Okay, now I would like to talk about you. How it happened that you became libertarian?
Well, it happened instinctively, I'd say. It happened instinctively. I was writing a blog. I was a blogger from a very young age, and I was lucky to get on the internet when nobody else, pretty much, when internet was still exotic. So I was 14, 15 years old. I was very young. Blogging was just to getting traction, and I was inventing my own political system. I wasn't happy with classical liberalism. I saw some contradictions from in the theory. And then Anatoly Levenchuk, who was one of the first public libertarians in Russia, came to my comment section and said, well, you're just inventing the wheel. It's like, it's been thought out by Rothbard. You should read Anatomy of State. And I read Anatomy of State, and I realized I am a libertarian. Since then, I developed my views, but that's the first time I realized I was a libertarian. But I became a libertarian before learning the word.
Okay, so what are your ideas? I mean, how do you want to improve your state? Right.
Well, I think, and that's what my lecture is going to be here in Colombia, is that I think all the major theoretical ideas has already been made, and libertarians theorize too much. It's now time to go and practice those ideas and to sell them
to win
the
elections?
audience. Not just to win the elections, to win the minds. Right now the minds are lost. And we have to learn from our enemies. We have to learn from the left, because the left are very successful. Their ideas sucks, but their method of delivering those ideas is amazing. And you got to learn from that.
Maybe the problem lies also in ideas.
No. See, that's where I disagree with you and most of the libertarians completely. It's not the ideas. Ideas matter if you want to succeed at reforming your country and reaching certain goals, but they don't matter in terms of delivery. It's really just the delivery that matters. It doesn't matter. You can have awful ideas, but with a good delivery.
But if I deliver gold, everybody will accept. And if I deliver shit, nobody will accept.
that's not true. And we know it's not true. We're sitting right now in South America, where communist ideas prevail all the time in countries like Venezuela, and you got to ask yourself, how comes shitty ideas that have been proven shitty hundreds of times or dozens of times, how come they still prevail? And the answer is the delivery is amazing, and you got to learn to deliver the message.
You will just make the revolution in the way of delivering ideas?
Well, it's not just that. It's part of what you need to do. But of course, the delivery is important. And when I say that, the punchline that I'm going to use in my lecture tomorrow is, some of you probably know Ben Shapiro. You maybe know Ben Shapiro. He's an American publicist, and he has this punchline, which sounds great, but it's false. He says that facts don't care about your feelings. Yeah, well, maybe, facts don't care about your feelings. That's true. But you know what else? Well, feelings don't care about your facts. And you just, unless you realize that, you're gonna lose out every single time. Feelings don't care about your facts, and you gotta learn how to work with people's feelings. You gotta learn how to touch people, because without that, it doesn't matter how good your facts are. You're gonna lose out to terrible ideas. You're going to lose out to a good delivery that the left has. That's the first thing. The second thing is you got to identify the enemy, and that's what.
So without enemy, you cannot deliver in the right way the ideas.
You can't. And that's why the left.
So you learned it or just to feel it, or you studied it?
No, these are some of the things that I learned by practice, really, because that's the kind of revolution I did in the Libertarian Party of Russia. When I returned to Russia, I've been a member of the Libertarian Party of Russia since almost the beginning, but I became active much later, so just 4 years ago, and when I returned to Russia. And that's the first thing I saw, because when I came back to Russia, we had audiences of like 20, 30 people in Moscow, and those were the same people we were talking to 4 years ago. That's like, it's a failure. And if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, that's the definition of idiocy. So I saw that, and I realized that the first mistake you're going to fix is you not preaching. You shouldn't preach to the choir. That's pointless. You have to talk to new people. You have to invite new people. You have to reach out to people who haven't heard your ideas. And the question that I get asked on my channel a lot, which actually annoys me because it shows that people don't understand what being a good messenger is. I always get asked this question: how come you're not tired of answering the same questions? I love answering the same questions, because if I have to answer the same question I answered 100 times before, it means there's a new person who never heard my answer, who never heard anything of what I have to deliver. And when you get this person in the audience, who tried to show that he understood you really well, I get bored, because why are you here? You should be doing what I'm doing. You should be talking to people who never heard the message. So that's the first thing I did. And we had I'd say modest success. As I mentioned, in 4 years, my lecture attracted more than 1,200 people in Moscow, and I could go today if it wasn't for the government. It's much harder to work now than a couple of years ago. But if I was to go to any city in Moscow and to announce that I will read a lecture there, I will have at least 200 people in a couple of days from the announcement registered.
Because of you, or because of libertarianism?
Well, both of these things.
Because
I'm a libertarian, and I'm good at delivering a libertarian message. So they come to hear me. They're not gonna come and listen to someone else, because unfortunately, very few people are good at delivering the message, and that's not just true in Russia. It's true pretty much everywhere. And again, the conference we're attending now is actually quite emblematic of that problem, because, well, again, we're preaching to the choir here. I don't see anyone being converted, because everyone's been converted long before, and we're reading lectures to each other. Like I love and respect Walter Block. And he's been a great influence on me. That's great. But is there anything he can tell me or you or everyone else on this conference that we haven't heard before? No. You have to, you need to get Walter Block and get him to speak to a new audience, because that's what he's good at. And he's a relatively good messenger. I'd say he's very efficient at what he does. At creating a good base. He's amazing at that. And you gotta show him to new people. Why is he talking to me? I don't need his speech.
Okay, we're here just to exchange minds,
I feel like...
Okay, but let's go.
Yeah.
Let's come back to our main topic. So your role of messenger, and how you picking up the new clients to libertarianism.
Well, I think there are several steps to that. First, you need to accept the values of the people you talk to and their concerns as your own. That's the most important thing, because what libertarians often do is that they claim others' concerns as unworthy and try to devaluate them. And that's just not the way to approach people's concerns. So whomever I talk to, like if you talk to leftists, you gotta accept that his concerns about class inequality are justified. And you gotta explain to him why his leftist solutions are not justified, while they will not solve his problem. And that's a very efficient way of talking to people. And that's why when I talk to a communist, or when I talk to a communist sympathizer, obviously if you talk to a hardcore communist, there's no way of convincing them. But if you talk to a communist sympathizer, well, you use one type of language. If you talk to a right-wing nationalist, that's a different kind of language. If you talk to a liberal, that's a third type of language. And it works. In that way, I attracted...
So you learn all these languages?
Yes, well,
you developed them and you learned them.
Well, you listen to the people's concerns. If someone tells you, well, the migration is a problem, your first reaction shouldn't be, no, it's not a problem. Your reaction should be, it's a problem because that and that and that, and you're absolutely right. And that's how libertarianism can solve these issues. And when a left-wing sympathizer says that, class inequality, the rich are getting richer, you're not saying them, well, they deserve to be rich. That's not what you say. You say, well, look, you're absolutely right. It's a problem because of the corruption, because of the crony capitalism, and look how government makes it possible. And the solution that left is offering you is to make those institutions that make it possible even stronger and more influential. Don't you think there's a problem in that? You're not going to be able to convince 100% of people, but that's what makes you interesting. That's what makes people want to listen to you, and that's what made me successful in Russia.
Okay, and so maybe you can explain what does it mean, libertarianism, to you?
Well, obviously it's non-aggression principle, or I call it non-aggression contract, but that's a more theoretical discussion. It's freedom of association, and I think that's the concept that's been a little underlooked in the libertarian theory, because when we concentrate on individual rights, which is important, we miss out a bigger picture that freedom of association is not something you can put a dollar sticker on, but it's something libertarians have to defend, and that's actually what can make, in practice, libertarianism more popular and populist. Because freedom of association is a concept that's easy to sell to the right, to the nationalist right, because it allows them to have their own cultural independence without a government sort of interfering and forcing them to co-live with the kind of people they don't want to live with. And it's also a concept that allows poor people to defend their way of life without rich coming in and buying off their land, buying off their property, and diluting that. So freedom of association is important, but it all stems from the non-aggression principle. But sometimes you got to throw some other concept that are more easily palpable. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and let's imagine now, let's play some kind of prediction. Yeah. Let's imagine that you became president of Russia.
Yeah.
So the first thing you do, you invite me, okay, I will talk to you. And the second thing, what your steps towards to introduce libertarianism in Russia?
Well, that's actually, I think Russia is one of the best places to implement libertarianism. The only thing you got to realize, and that's a punchline I use in my lectures, is that there are two sides of libertarianism, and I disagree with people who try to distance themselves. It's really the two sides of the same thing. It's anarcho-capitalism and minarchism. They're not in contradiction. Anarcho-capitalism is the ideology, and it's got to be perfect, it's got to be ideal, and it's got to be, and it exists in a vacuum of ideas. So, but when you put ideas to practice, you got to compromise, and that's how you get minarchism. But just because you compromise, it doesn't mean you have to find theoretical justifications to the compromises that you make. So that's just a sideline. So if we're talking about practice, and I think the best way to approach libertarian reforms is you basically leave everything as it is. like all the laws, because you don't want to create anarchy in the worst kind of sense. Because if you introduce anarchy, you're not going to get libertarianism. You got to get like a million different states, and they're going to be scarier than whatever you just dismantled. So you got to leave everything in place. But what you do is you enact a single law that says, if you buy a property, if you buy a land, you are free to opt out of the government laws on this private property to live as you will. That way, you're not dismantling cities. Like transforming cities as they exist today is an impossible task. You're just not going to do it, because the way they've been constructed during the statism is just, there's so much conflicts of interest. You just got to leave them alone. But you got to give people an opportunity to associate with each other on their own terms. And how do you do that? Well, in Russia, there's lots of land. You can move like 100, 200 kilometers from Moscow, buy 1,000 acres, and there you go. You can establish a city. You can opt out of most of the statist law, and there you go. There's your libertarian libertarian experiment. And you're not disrupting people who want to live as they used to live, but you're free to associate on your own terms if you want to do that. And I think that's the most sensible, the best approach to libertarian reforms. Everything else is a pipe dream.
Okay, and how do you see the future of the libertarian movement in Russia?
Well, that's a completely different question. I'd say, like, if you asked me this question 2 years ago, I'd be wholly optimistic and rosy. But things changed, and I'm in South America now. It's been 2 months since I've been in South America, because basically there's a huge crackdown. The government crackdown on any kind of opposition, and Libertarian Party as well. As I said, just 2 months ago I was in jail. I had my house searched for the 4th time. A lot of my friends are under house arrest. Some of them are arrested in jail right now, and more than 30 of my closest associates are in forced immigration. So they can't return to Russia or they will be arrested. So right now I'd say that perspectives are grim, but just because any opposition in Russia, opposition to Putin in Russia, has very little prospects as well.
Okay, thank you for this very interesting introduction.
Okay.
I emphasize, because I intend to speak to you more often, because you are a perfect speaker and you have plenty of not strange but not ordinary ideas. As we can present and as we can find here in the conference, you are something new and fresh, in your actions. So I would like to talk to you a little bit more. Maybe next our talk will be devoted to the present situation of Russia. Okay, we can discuss something these topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.